It's the week beginning Monday the 24th of August, and this is Business Unwrapped, brought to you by Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles. In this bonus podcast series, I talk to industry experts about how companies can change for the better after the coronavirus pandemic. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the business week. And joining me today from the week's digital team is Jo Evans. But first, our special guest is transformational coach Dr Yvette Ankrah MBE. Hi, Yvette.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the show. What is a transformational coach?
Well, my work is all about helping people perform better, and I work in the space of mindset and beliefs. So I'm trained in neuro-linguistic programming and performance coaching, and that's what I help people transform and change.
Okay, so some mental solutions, but in a business setting, basically.
Yeah, for me, it can be business or personal. For me, I do it in the business space because I've also got a background in consulting as well.
Yeah, you say on your website that you are a recovering overachiever. What does that mean?
Well, the MBE after the name, the doctor at the front, and lots of other letters in between. So I was somebody who always was pushing for success and burnt out along the way. So that's part of my journey, talking about stress, burnout, etc. And, you know, the quest for success. So that's some of the things I talk about.
And Jo, our very own Mr. Burnout, what are we discussing this week? What have you chosen as your business story?
Is Rishi Sunak in line for a refund on his pandemic spending spree?
Today I am making available an initial £330 billion of guarantees, equivalent to 15% of our GDP. That means any business who needs access to cash to pay their rent, their salaries, suppliers, or purchase stock will be able to access a government-backed loan or credit on attractive terms. And if demand is greater than the initial £330 billion I'm making available today, I will go further and provide as much capacity as required.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak speaking back in March. Heady days. Jo, what is the story this week?
Yes, so we all remember Rishi Sunak very sort of famously announcing that he would do whatever was necessary to prop up the economy back in March when the pandemic hit. 4 months ago, another £12 billion was released to help small businesses and business leaders through the coronavirus pandemic. It turns out that £1.5 billion of it remains unclaimed. The government said that it's working with local councils to make sure that it reaches the businesses that are eligible to receive it. But if it doesn't get claimed, essentially it will go back to the Treasury at the end of the month, and Rishi will get a slight refund on that rather large investment in local business and small business leaders.
Yeah, which actually, I mean, in terms of the country, might be a good thing, mightn't it? £1.5 billion back in the government coffers. But I suppose for small business people listening to this, that's just going to hurt, isn't it? The idea that there's money left unclaimed. What about the money that has been claimed, Jo? How is it being used?
So the loan scheme was slightly criticised by business leaders because it required a personal guarantee from the business owner in order to claim. I think that probably gives a little bit of insight into what the loans are being used for. If business leaders were concerned about giving a personal guarantee on their loan, it probably suggests that it was being used to tide companies over that had seen their custom collapse and that needed to cover overheads like wages. I think that very sort of strongly suggests that they were sort of investing the money in sort of surviving the present rather than sort of thinking to the future at the moment.
Yvette, are you surprised by this story? Because, you know, we're constantly being told from small businesses that they're on their knees at the moment, and yet here they are not claiming the relief available to them.
I think a lot of people have had trouble claiming, and that's been a problem. So I'm on lots of different forums and speak to a lot of small businesses, and a lot of them find that they're not eligible. So they can't actually claim the money. And what happened at the start of the pandemic, a lot of businesses weren't eligible. And then they, because of the criticism, they changed some of the criteria. But there were still so many who can't actually access this fund. And if it's about future pacing, which obviously we need to do to protect the businesses, but we also need to talk about what's happening right now. As you said, they're on their knees. If they can't pay staff, they can't cover wages, they can't cover suppliers, they won't be there to plan for the future.
Yeah, okay, so you've both mentioned this idea, is this pot of money for tiding businesses over, or is it for investing in the future of business? And I guess, like, the successful businesses would do both, wouldn't they? But it's difficult, isn't it, at the moment, Yvette, to be planning ahead whilst you're trying to cover your costs?
it's still looking at how you can change and innovate. But even if you think about what the loan money was for, it's to invest in your business. So with that restriction, if you currently have, debts outstanding and you have no way of covering those bills, how can you invest in your business? Because you still, it's the juggle. So I think what they've done to support people is not what's needed. And that has been said by so many different organisations, but the government doesn't seem to be hearing that at the moment.
And also it's all through local councils, isn't it, Joe? So there's an issue there of communication as well. Have businesses actually been made aware sufficiently that these grants are available to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Local Government Association, which works with local authorities, has said that what is essentially needed is just more time, that the councils need more time to distribute the funding. Because, as we all know, it was fairly hastily put together, that the entire sort of bailout packages had to be fairly hastily put together, and it just wasn't brilliantly communicated, I don't think, to business people. As Yvette says, a lot of businesses just didn't know kind of what they needed to be doing, what they needed to be eligible for the loans in the first place. And yeah, I think it is a matter of sort of time and extending that time to give businesses a chance to first of all ride out the immediate aftershock and give them time to start thinking about the future so that they can invest this money in such a way as to grow their business, as opposed to just sort of plug holes in the business as they are at the moment.
What are the ways, Yvette, to use this moment of disruption that we've all been living through to create new business opportunities?
Definitely to look at what you want going forward. So this is where the planning does come in. So a lot of people were thinking about having mobile ready websites or thinking about having online systems. Rather than thinking about it, now's the time to start bringing that in. So if you can get hold of that money, that's when you're going to be using that for. Most people are now using their mobiles to get onto the web, also using a lot of voice activated software, and loads of small businesses aren't ready to move into that space. So this is a time to look at that and perhaps invest in creating some of those systems. It can start by simply having a mobile responsive website, just some tweaks to your current website so people can look at it easier. And that might just mean getting a web developer in. So it could be a small change, but that could have a profound effect going forward.
Still carries a cost though, doesn't it? That web developer, equally the graphic designer, the online customer support, that's all cash.
But that's what you can use the government grant for. If you're eligible, you can use it for that purpose. The other thing is looking at aspects of your business that you can put online. So to give an example, I have a client that's a physiotherapist. And obviously hands-on work was not available. You couldn't have people in there. So she started doing online consultations. Being able to offer that, she could reach a wider audience. She could still maintain her contact with current clients. Using Zoom technology, she can see them, get them to move, etc. And now that she's got hands-on, she now has another part of her business that she wants to continue because it's still bringing in revenue and still valid.
Yeah, I mean, being alert to those opportunities can be difficult as well, can't it? It's one thing to say, right, I'm going to move on to Zoom for 3 months just to tide me over. It's another thing to then think, right, I'm going to pivot. This has worked really well for me. My whole business is now online. That is, going back to what we were saying earlier about thinking about business in your brain, that's a mental adjustment for the business person.
It is. And not everybody will want to do that, can do that, or needs to do that. It's looking at what aspect of your business will work really well in an online environment. A lot of advice, consultancy, support, anything that you can do in that way works well online. It's not about completely changing what it is you offer as well. It's maybe have an enhanced offer by adding that online.
I mean, it's all very well talking about this from the point of view of entrepreneurs and people who own the businesses, Joe. I mean, you look at the cuts to the workforce in retail, for example, Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, House of Fraser, John Lewis. The shift towards online shopping and home delivery, that appears to be the new normal now. How should people who work in those sectors respond? Well,
no, you're quite right. There's been obviously a bloodbath on the high street in terms of job cuts. It's very clear that if Britain used to be a nation of shopkeepers, we're now a nation of online shoppers, and studies into the way that people's behaviour have changed in the last few months bear this out very strongly. A huge study by Waitrose has revealed that 77% of people now do at least some of their grocery shopping online. That's up from 61% a year ago. And interestingly, the biggest change is in over 55s who maybe a year ago wouldn't have even considered doing their shopping online, are now heading online in larger and larger numbers. That figure has trebled from 8% last year to 23% now. I agree. It's very difficult for kind of, yes, if you're a high street employee and you've lost your job in the last few months, the future possibly doesn't look hugely bright. But then I guess we're back into the sort of territory of Yvette's field of work and thinking about ways to sort of reinvent yourself. And this is a changing of the tide that the high street is going to have to get used to.
And to get a little bit, Channel 4 reality show about this, Yvette, if you're working from home, you could kind of spruce up your house, I imagine, to actually help you at business as well. You know, people's home environments are now becoming their workplace.
Definitely, where you work is really important. As we've seen, we're working in broom cupboards, off the edge of a kitchen table, on the end of beds. So if you know it's going to be a much more permanent way of being, looking at how you rearrange your working environment is important.
Like how?
Lighting's incredibly important. We often don't think about lighting. If you think when you're in the office, strip lighting is really not good for you. So if you can get natural light, look at how your lighting is, and also think about the colours that are around you as well, that impacts on mood and what goes on for you, and how you kind of change your space from daytime use to sort of evening. So you might just have a corner of the room that you use, but it might be at this time I finished work, so you might want to screen it off or move away from that space so that you go back into your private space, because that's the other thing that people are missing, the move between the private and sort of work, having that cut off. You'd come home, drop your bag down, throw your keys on the side, and it's like, right, I'm home now, I don't have to think about work. When work is all in the same space, it's harder to move away from the two.
Yeah, actually as well, I mean, people generally are quite pleased to have got rid of the commute, aren't they, if they're working from home? That's one of the things that they're happy about. But obviously as a podcaster, one of the things that I think is, well, that's the time I usually used to reach people, and it's a special time. You're very aware of it as a podcaster. You're speaking to people at the moment, they're decompressing between being at work and getting home. And I suppose the danger of working in your spare bedroom or on the kitchen table or in the shed at the back of the garden is there is no commute. There's no decompression. Frustrating as the commute was, you're back in family life with no boundary between the two, having allowed yourself to just clear out a bit.
And that's where you should create the boundary. So if they're listening to your podcast, that should be the sign of the end of their day. Listen to the podcast and then move into evening mode. So you can still create those boundaries. They may seem a bit more artificial now, but it's important to have that decompression so you can separate it, because what I've noticed with people is that there's almost no cut off and they keep working.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that can be a benefit statistically to the economy, can't it, Joe? It's just not a benefit to people's health.
No, absolutely. And as a journalist, the news agenda doesn't stop. And I've definitely found this, that since I've migrated from the office into my living room, it's very difficult to switch off. I think the part of the problem is that the transition back in March or April or whenever your office sent you home was a crisis transition. It was a transition from normality into the sort of crisis of the pandemic. And I think possibly people might have got into the mindset of working like that. And I think organisations also have got into the mindset of working like that, huge numbers of employees are now working remotely while juggling childcare and family commitments and all these other things. And I think that's possibly because the transition happened in an atmosphere that wasn't very conducive to people's well-being. And again, when we're talking about the sort of government loans and the ways that businesses can invest, I think that making home working sort of the new normal, to use the phrase that's everywhere at the moment, rather than a sort of state of crisis, is quite a sort of valuable way to invest in your employees and invest in your employees' well-being.
Mm.
And Yvette, I know you specialise in helping women. A lot of those retail jobs that I was discussing earlier, have disproportionately affected women. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, despite the challenges of children and all the rest of it, actually working from home you'd think might benefit women. How do you think they're going to come out of this at the end of it?
Worse, actually. I do think it's going to set back women a long way. And the reason for that, there has been research that's already shown that irrespective of what people earn, couples, we're looking at heterosexual partners here, the woman is still the main caregiver. She's still the one that's juggling her time and juggling the homeschooling. When we had that, obviously it's school holidays at the moment, but she's still probably juggling that because there's very little childcare available at the moment. For those who had their own businesses or worked part-time, they've often lost their independence. Their financial independence is gone because they've lost their jobs. The other thing is they can't go back to work until the children go back to school. So for a lot of women, this time has actually been quite tough, quite difficult business-wise, let alone the emotional side of it. You've got a lot of issues within relationships that were there are now writ large. You've obviously got an awareness there's an increase of domestic violence. There's so much that's impacting women at the moment. One of the issues that I've had throughout the coronavirus response from the government is that they almost didn't consider women at all. I have clients who are also beauticians, and they have been messed about, they have been stopped working, some of them really struggling to get back their livelihoods as well.
Do you think that there might be a shift on that? We're reading gossip about how the government might start using more female spokespeople just for that reason, presentationally, wanting to say, we care about women. Would you like to see some money put aside for female entrepreneurs?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Rose Review showed what was happening with women in business anyway before this happened. That was about women not being given money access to funding. When they go to venture capitalists, they're not seen as credible. So you're already having an impact in women setting up businesses and getting money and growing businesses. And now I co-wrote back in 2015 a manifesto for women in business to say we need more support, we need more advocacy, we need more access. 5 years on, there has been some change, but I think the coronavirus pandemic may see it roll back even further. And I remember watching Boris Johnson, RPM, talking on one of the select committees. He was questioned about what women were around the table, and he sort of answered as, well, how many women's enough? And it's like, well, actually, you need to have some. You need to have a dialogue with some women. If they're not around the table, their voices aren't being heard. So I don't want spokespeople, I actually want people that are actually going to make change.
Okay, so Yvette, if you're listening to this and you run a small business, give us a few things. Give us 3 things that you can do to future-proof your business.
So have a look at what your business has that could easily transfer online, or consider a new product and service that looks online. Look at what customers are there now for you. Your old customers may not be available to afford your services or use you, but there will be customers out there. So you might need to create new marketing for a new customer base. So the other thing is looking at yourself and your beliefs and what you want and making sure that you're okay. Because if you're making decisions from a place of panic, stress, overwhelm, you're not going to be making the best decisions. So start with you and then work your way out.
And with that, we have unwrapped your business week. My thanks to Yvette Ankrah and Jo Evans. Thanks to our sponsors too. This series of Business Unwrapped has been brought to you by the new electric Volkswagen ABT e-Transporter 6.1, the emissions-free way to keep your business on the road. Do remember to subscribe to our weekly show, The Week Unwrapped, on your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. The music is by Tom Morby. The producers, Sarah Miles and Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until next time, bye-bye.